Welcome to Sports House Podcast. I'm Chase House. A lot has happened since last time. My dreams of Tom Brady not getting a 7th Super Bowl were inevitably destroyed. J.J. Watt is looking for another home. What does that mean for Deshaun Watson? What should the Jets do in the upcoming draft? Trevor Lawrence was asked to throw early for his pro day. Are the Utah Jazz and Boston Celtics contenders? And March Madness is back. How excited am I? We'll get to all that. We are going to start with the Super Bowl. It's been about a week since Super Bowl 55, and so I've had a little bit of time to decompress. And so I just want to start by saying, me! Tom Brady now has 7 Super Bowls. 7 Super Bowls. That is more than any other franchise has Super Bowls, which is just disgusting. And I do not want to live in this world where that is reality. I'm sorry, but Peyton Manning, when you retired, you just left the AFC for Tom Brady to win basically every Super Bowl. You bastard. This is the worst. Like, for the first time in my life, I was pulling for the Kansas City Chiefs, which made me want to vomit uncontrollably. I was rooting for COVID to cancel the game completely. So there's one good side of this, at least, and it's that the Kansas City Chiefs got blown out. The final score was 31-9. And like I said before, I thought a team was going to get up. I thought Tampa Bay would get a lead. I just never thought for a minute that they'd be able to contain Patrick Mahomes for 4 quarters. I mean, the Chiefs didn't even have a touchdown, which is insane. That's the biggest loss of Patrick Mahomes' career, which is also crazy. And he made some insane-looking incompletions, but no touchdowns, which is basically the only thing that I wanted to see. I just wanted to see some points. I thought it was going to be a shootout, and at least I would get a good game out of it. But it was a blowout, and a team that I hated beat a team that I hated. So this Super Bowl was just the worst. The Buccaneers defense was the MVP of that game. If you hold the Chiefs to no touchdowns, I mean, they just set it perfectly up. You know Brady's going to get one. And I was shocked to see Kansas City not get in the end zone. I was also shocked, personally, that they didn't. I'd never seen Le'Veon Bell on the field for the entirety of the game, even when they're getting blown out and they had to have a running back catching it out of the backfield. They put in Williams. I really don't know. The Chiefs looked bad for the first time in a long time. And there was no miracle finish to turn it around. It was 4 straight quarters of not being able to put up points. And look, it set up so perfectly for Tom Brady the whole season. I mean, he signs with the most stacked team in the league, the Buccaneers, and they get even more stacked after he signs with them. Everybody wants to go play with him. So they improve tremendously. They have talent all over, not to mention home field advantage in the Super Bowl. And then your defense pitches a shutout against Patrick Mahomes and doesn't allow them to get in the end zone one time. I mean, from the very beginning of the year when he signed there, everybody knew it. Everybody knew this is the team to be. This is going to be the most stacked team, the most talented roster come playoff time. And there was some bumps in the road. I mean, COVID made it so there was no preseason, no mini camp, which is understandable when you have a new team who hasn't played together. It's going to take a little bit before they start to mesh together. And it really seems like they figured it out just in time for the postseason. I mean, because the whole regular season, they weren't even good against playoff teams. They beat one playoff team the whole regular season, and Brady struggled in those games. and the whole Buccaneers team struggled in those games. They were 1-5. But then when the real playoffs come around, they got it going, and they looked like the best team. And they showed it. I mean, third receiver Antonio Brown, backup running back Leonard Fournette, they're stacked. And it just wore out teams in the postseason. And I just want to say, now there is some really stupid talk about Patrick Mahomes. I mean, before the game, there was talk where this was such a huge Super Bowl because if Mahomes beats Brady, Mahomes will have 2 Super Bowls already, and Brady will just still have 6, so he might be able to catch him. And then the narrative completely flipped around, and people like Keyshawn Johnson said Patrick Mahomes isn't going to get to another Super Bowl. So the talk literally went from Mahomes can maybe get 7 if he wins this one to now, oh, he's stuck at 1. And that's all I'm going to say for now on the Super Bowl because I'm getting too nauseous just thinking about it, and I'm happy it's over. So we will be right back after this. Is your child showing any of these symptoms?
Laughing, sleeping, uncontrollable eating, slurring words, inability to complete full sentences, loss of memory, philosophical thinking?
Your baby may be abusing marijuana.
Some long-term effects may include total loss of brain function, complete paralyzation, total organ failure, increased risk of racism, sudden death. Always remember, a stoned child is no longer your child. For your own safety, please contact the local police department.
Sports House Podcast.
J.J. Watt was released from the Houston Texans. He said that he talked to the front office and asked to be released, and they granted that, and so now he's a free agent. Meanwhile, Deshaun Watson is wondering what the hell, but I'll get into that later. J.J. Watt now is a free agent, and he was with the Houston Texans for 10 years, the greatest Houston Texan of all time, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year winner, and he's second in the league in sacks amongst active players, with 101 sacks, only trailing Von Miller with 106. So a serious defensive legend is on the open market, and I just wanted to talk about some intriguing destinations. The first one, which is the most obvious, is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Because not only does his brother TJ Watt play on the Steelers, but also his other brother, Derek Watt, is the fullback on the Steelers. So if he goes to the Steelers, he will be on a team with both of his brothers. But, I mean, there is questions at quarterback and what they're going to do, what Big Ben is planning on doing, and whether or not he retires or comes back to play again. But the Steelers, they have a good team. So if he joins the Pittsburgh Steelers, it's going to be him joining the Steelers to play with his brothers, not necessarily because they're a contender, and they very well might be. But he would have to wait and see what Big Ben does in the offseason, and if he retires, who's going to be their quarterback? What are they going to do in the draft? But all these experts are saying that J.J. Watt is chasing a ring. And then they're the same ones that say if he's chasing a ring, that he's going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I, for one, I don't see J.J. Watt as the kind of player, well, I guess the only word that I could really use is a sellout. I don't see J.J. Watt just jumping to the best team for the easiest ring. I mean, I see him joining a contender. I don't think he's going to go to the worst team in the league, but I don't think he's a sellout that's going to join the best team and just go for the easy ring, the easy way out. From what I've seen, the type of player that J.J. Watt is, I don't see that happening. I don't see him going to the Buccaneers. And I sure as hell hope not. And I really don't want to see the NFL become even more so like the NBA, which it already is on track. You see stars teaming up on teams now and basically recruiting other players. And I like how the NFL was different than the NBA as far as that went. Because I don't like teams just getting stacked to go win a ring. And the NBA, that's the biggest flaw of it, in my opinion, right now. And it's not going to go away. But J.J. Watt, I don't think he's going to be Kevin Durant. I don't think he's going to be the superstar that joins the best team in the league. Another destination that I think makes sense is the Green Bay Packers. I mean, I talked last time on my last podcast about how Aaron Rodgers, if he's on a team that he thinks is declining come next season when they have to go through free agency and they're already over the cap, and that's worth mentioning too, is they're way over the cap right now. So J.J. Watt would have to go there for a team-friendly deal, and they'd probably have to, lose somebody else on their team in order to afford J.J. Watt. But if that's what it takes to keep Aaron Rodgers, then you have to go that route, and it would make their defense respectable. Aaron Rodgers has been asked to do it by himself way too many times. If you get a player like J.J. Watt to really transform that defense, and the Packers, if they have a good defense with Aaron Rodgers in his clearly still in his prime, just won the MVP, I think they become a legit Super Bowl favorite if they sign J.J. Watt and it makes it so Aaron Rodgers wants to stay around. Maybe we see the Packers go the route that the New England Patriots went when they had Jimmy Garoppolo and they drafted him just in case Brady left or retired. But then Brady ended up staying, so they chose Brady over Garoppolo and shipped him off to San Francisco. Maybe that's what they do with Jordan Love. Ship him out and stick with Aaron Rodgers and try to win another Super Bowl. Signing J.J. Watt obviously improves your defense, and it just might be the missing piece that the Packers need to win a Super Bowl or to win an NFC Championship game. Another landing spot is the Cleveland Browns. And I know, it's the Cleveland Browns, but, I mean, they have a lot of good players. And they made the playoffs this year. They won a playoff game. And J.J. Watt being alongside Myles Garrett and that defense, with all the studs that they already have on offense, they might be a legit contender, not to win the Super Bowl necessarily, but to make a deep run. And who knows, if Baker keeps playing well and keeps improving, and you put J.J. Watt on that team, I think you could see him in the AFC Championship. Another destination is the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, the Seahawks, they were on pace for a historically terrible and the historically worst defense of all time. They clearly need help. Russell Wilson needs help. Their defense is holding them back right now. And the Seahawks like to have good defense. So expect them to make a real big push to try to sign J.J. Watt and kind of reamp Seattle and put them back into the contender category. Because we already know what Russell Wilson can do. We already know how good that offense is. And so if they had a good defense, not even a great defense, just not a historically terrible defense. So if they sign J.J. Watt, that puts them in the category of Super Bowl contenders, and then they can just draft solid defense and the offensive line. They got to do something about the offensive line and try to reamp your defense to help out your offense which we know can put up points and outscore nearly any team. But the defense cannot be historically terrible and expect to win a Super Bowl. It's just not going to happen. And players like J.J. Watt don't become available very often. And the last landing spot that I want to talk about is the Denver Broncos. And there's slight bias here because I am a Bronco fan. But when you look at their 2015 team, the team that won the Super Bowl, their defense on the opposite side of Von Miller was DeMarcus Ware. If they sign J.J. Watt and pair him up with Bradley Chubb and Von Miller and their defense that was already ranked with the top of the league, their offense who has playmaker after playmaker. And the Broncos, they have tons of cap. I think they're 7th in the league right now as far as cap room. They can sign a player like J.J. Watt, and they just released A.J. Bouye, which saved them, I think it was $11 million in cap. So they got even more cap room now. They own the 9th pick in the draft, which I'm hoping they take a cornerback. And if they get good, solid play from the quarterback position, which I believe they will from Drew Lock, most likely Drew Lock, I think he will play better because he moved from an offensive coordinator to a new offensive coordinator in a COVID year, which there was no mini camp, there was no preseason, and he's a young quarterback learning a new offense with new players. So I think Drew Lock will play better, and he has a lot of weapons to work with. The Broncos, they have firepower all across their team. Offensively, they have studs, mostly acquired in the draft, and their defense, which I talked about, is already good. And so if you sign J.J. Watt and pair him up with Von Miller and Bradley Chubb, that defense becomes elite, and it just might be what the Broncos need to put them into the conversation of Super Bowl contenders and beating out Kansas City in the division. What will happen with Deshaun Watson? That's the question that everybody wants to know the answer to. And it's a weird situation because the Houston Texans are 1 year removed from blowing a 24-point lead in the playoffs against the Kansas City Chiefs. Since then, they've lost almost everybody. They lost their GM, their head coach, their best player in DeAndre Hopkins. He was traded. And now the greatest Houston Texan of all time, J.J. Watt, was granted his release. But Deshaun Watson, he signed a contract extension 5 months ago that puts him with the Texans through 2025. And now he wants out. And the Texans are in a weird situation because here they are with a new GM and new coach, and they're completely trying to change this organization around, which has been a dumpster fire, to put it lightly. The Texans now have a new coach and a new GM with a quarterback on the roster in their prime who is a franchise player, and he doesn't even want anything to do with the organization. And they're trying for the life of them to salvage what seems like it's already broken. But Deshaun Watson's also in a weird spot because he just signed a contract extension 5 months ago. And the other Houston team, the Houston Rockets, they just lost their star, James Harden, and they were in a similar situation where they had a lot of time left on their contract, and they wanted out, and the franchise made it clear that they're not trading these players. The Rockets said they were not going to get rid of Harden. They weren't trading him, that they would make it uncomfortable if they had to, but he was under contract, and so they were keeping him. And then he was traded. And if you have a star that doesn't want to play on your team, it seems like the star gets what they want. And if Deshaun Watson isn't happy in Houston and doesn't want to play there, I think the best thing for the Texans is to trade him, because you're trying to rebuild a reputation for Houston that you'll do by your players right. And if you have players like J.J. Watt and Deshaun Watson both wanting out, if you grant that and you let them out and you start fresh, I think the best place would be to trade Deshaun Watson to the New York Jets, who have the second overall pick in the draft, which I think the Texans would then use on somebody like Zach Wilson. But also in the trade would be Sam Darnold, kind of like a backup option in case your quarterback that you draft doesn't pan out. And so it's really the safest bet to trade him to New York, to get Sam Darnold, and to be able to draft a franchise quarterback. So I think Deshaun Watson to the Jets makes a lot of sense. And it was one of his preferred destinations, which I don't know why, because if he was chasing a ring, he's not going to find it with the New York Jets. It's going to be to start a franchise over. But it was one of his preferred destinations, as well as Jacksonville. So maybe the Texans make a trade pitch to Jacksonville for the first overall, and who knows, maybe that's why Urban Meyer had Trevor Lawrence throw early at his pro day, to just see what's out there and to see if getting Deshaun Watson was even a possibility. The New York Jets have the second overall pick in the NFL draft, and I think that they should trade it. I think that they should trade it for Deshaun Watson because he is the best option at quarterback for your team with the second overall pick. They don't have the opportunity to get Trevor Lawrence. And Deshaun Watson is already a proven franchise player. And there's a lot of question marks about Justin Fields and Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson, his biggest question mark for me is his sample size. He doesn't have a lot of film playing really talented teams. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it won't translate into the NFL, because if you look at a player like Josh Allen, he played at Wyoming after transferring from a junior college. So he didn't have a lot of film against top teams, and his sample size was small, but he had the intangibles, and he had the skills and the athleticism, and he was someone that a team seen that they could develop into a quarterback, a franchise quarterback. And so I'm not saying that Zach Wilson will not turn out in the NFL. I'm just saying it's a big question mark. And I thought the same thing with Josh Allen. I thought that his sample size was too small, and that, he looked like he had a good arm, and he looked like he had the intangibles, but, what really can he do against good teams? And so I wasn't super sold on him, and we see what he can do in the NFL. So sometimes it does pay off, and sometimes drafting intangibles works. And the same could be said about Justin Fields. Both of these guys can be players that take your franchise somewhere, but they're also a lot of question marks. And there's not a question mark around Deshaun Watson. There is on his availability, but we already know that he's not a bust, that he is a franchise player, and that he even put up numbers with the Texans team that won 4 games. So Deshaun Watson is the best available option if you are the New York Jets. You do everything you can to get him, and you say to the Texans, look, you have a guy that does not want to be there. We will give you Sam Darnold and the second overall pick and maybe, another first or whatever they want to land Deshaun Watson. And then the Texans are able to draft a player like Zach Wilson or Justin Fields, and then maybe they can ship off Sam Darnold somewhere else and get another asset for their rebuilding team. Trevor Lawrence was asked by Urban Meyer, head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, to throw early at his pro day. And there was a lot of mixed feelings about this because a lot of people seen Trevor Lawrence already as the presumed number 1 overall pick, and nothing that he did in his pro day was going to change that because we all seen the tape on him. We all seen the games. We all know what Trevor Lawrence can do. And to me, Trevor Lawrence is a generational talent. He literally looks like a Peyton Manning with legs, that he could live up to the potential of a Joe Montana or a Peyton Manning type player. He looks like the real deal. And the drop off from number 1 to number 2 in the draft is so huge. I mean, there's a lot of quarterbacks out there. There's 4 that are predicted to go in the first round. But the drop off from Trevor Lawrence to all the other ones is so drastic. But I like the fact that Trevor Lawrence came out and he threw. I mean, he's going to be an NFL quarterback. And I don't want him to be like one of the prima donnas that just says, nah, I'm not going to throw. I know I'm number 1. I know I'm the best, whatever. He's being drafted to play football. He should go throw. If a coach wants to see him go throw, he should have no problem with that. He should say, yeah, I'll go throw, and then go show what he can do, and that's exactly what he did. He missed only on 1 throw, and he looked like Trevor Lawrence always looks. Really good. But I just can't help but think maybe Urban Meyer is kind of testing the waters with trade talks for the number 1 overall pick. Maybe Urban Meyer wants to see if Deshaun Watson's available, and maybe they trade with the Houston Texans for the 1st overall pick for Deshaun Watson. Either way, wherever Trevor Lawrence goes, I think he's going to be extremely successful. We'll be right back after this very serious message. Man, I really don't want to do this homework.
You don't have to.
With Sports House Podcast, just pretend all your problems magically disappear. Sit back, procrastinate, and just enjoy. Now, back to the podcast. And remember, kids, that homework bullshit.
The Utah Jazz have the best record in the NBA at 22-5. Now, does that mean that the Utah Jazz are contenders? I'm from Utah, but I'm not a Jazz fan, so this isn't bias. And I believe if they were in the East, they'd be contenders. But come playoff time in the Western Conference, it's going to be a completely different story. Matching up with the Clippers or the Lakers in a 7-game series is a lot different than beating all these teams in the regular season. The Jazz, they look good. They do. They move the ball extremely well. Their ball movement is phenomenal, and their defense is great. They're balling out. Now, how long will it last? I don't see it lasting, too long. I think the Jazz are a legit team. I just don't think that they're better than the Clippers or the Lakers. They're not going to beat them in a 7-game series. And I don't think they're going to hold on to the 1 seed either. I think when it's all said and done and the playoffs are starting, the Jazz are maybe the 3 seed. And that's not a knock either. That's just a compliment to both the LA teams. And like I said, if the Jazz, if they played in the Eastern Conference, they might get to the finals, but they don't. And like I said, if they played in the East, then they might get to the NBA Finals or the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't think they'd get past the Nets, but they're close. I just don't think they're over the hump with the amount of stacked teams that are in the league. Come playoff time, I think they get bounced by the Lakers if they match up against them in like 6 games at the very most. And I hope I'm wrong. I do. I would love to see the Jazz beat any of those teams in the playoffs, but I mean, come playoff time, things look a lot different. The Boston Celtics have 2 players in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum who are averaging combined 52.6 points a game. And for as young as they are, is insanely impressive. And Jaylen Brown, who I think, definitely deserves to win the most improved player of the year. He's really transformed his game. I mean, he came into the league and he couldn't shoot. His shooting was his liability. He was always a good defender and a crazy athlete, but he couldn't really shoot the ball. And now he's shooting it better than he ever has in his whole career, and he's an actual threat from three-point land. And we all know who Jason Tatum is. And the Boston Celtics, they're a weird team because their record doesn't really show who they are. They're 13-13, 500. And they've had a lot of injuries. They started the season without Kemba Walker, who's just barely coming back and still really yet to get going again. And right as he came back, they lost Marcus Smart, which is huge for the Celtics. You can make the argument that he is one of, if not the most important player on the team behind Jason Tatum. When the Celtics are healthy, they're the second best team in the East, behind the Brooklyn Nets. I think they're better than the Bucks. They're better than the Sixers. And Jason Tatum is no longer transforming into a superstar. He is at the superstar level. And Jaylen Brown is now an all-star player. So even being just 500, 13-13, I still think the Boston Celtics are more contenders than the Utah Jazz at 22-5. And a lot of it, most of it, is because they play in the Eastern Conference. March Madness is right around the corner. Selection Sunday is just about a month away, and all seems right in the world. March Madness will be back, and there still seems to be a void left inside of me from not having March Madness last year. It just doesn't really sit well. And it is going to be a lot different. It's all being played in a bubble, so they will not be in different cities, and usually when they're in Salt Lake City, I like to go to some of the games, but nonetheless, it's back. There's a lot of powerhouse teams that aren't having their usual seasons. For example, Duke is 8-8, just 500, and they're on the bubble, as well as North Carolina, who's 12-4, and then you have the University of Kentucky, who is so far down they can't even see the bubble, at 6-13, and they'll probably need to win the SEC in order to even make it in to the tournament. So yes, March Madness will look a lot different, but just the fact that it is being played is all that matters to me. I mean, March is the best time of the year for sports. I mean, there's a game on every other hour, it seems, and just the entire month is filled with basketball games, buzzer beaters, Cinderella stories, brackets being busted. I mean, I really missed filling out a bracket so much. Going the entire year without even filling out a bracket was just weird to me. There's just something about big tournaments that gets the sports juices flowing. And this is like a prime example of why college football should have a big tournament too. I mean, clearly there's money involved, and it has nothing to do with the fact that the NCAA won't make money. It's just utter stupidness. March Madness is so great because any team in the bracket can win it all. You have 64 teams that all have an even playing field once the bracket comes around. It's fair game. They're all in it. And that's what sports is about. And that's my biggest knock to college football, is the fact that a 4 playoff team is really the best that they can do. It's just, they have the right idea, they have the right intentions, but they need to keep expanding on the idea, because 4 playoff teams makes no sense for football. 64 for basketball is just nearly heaven. And I'm usually not even super invested into college basketball for the entire season, but come March Madness, it's my favorite time of the year. There really is nothing like it. That's all I have for this episode of Sports House Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you also enjoyed the fake-ass ads that I implemented, you can go to patreon.com/sportshouse, and anything that you guys want to contribute or donate, I'd appreciate a lot, and it'll go a long way into making it so I can keep making content for you guys. Thanks for listening, and until next time.